CFMOTO 800 MTX, we're traveling through beautiful Bosnia, following the translucent trail to put CFMOTO's latest release through its paces. In these tests, it's important to me to evaluate the off-road capabilities and to see whether it's a true adventure bike. Yes, I think there are hardly any better conditions for conducting an off-road test of an adventure touring bike than here in beautiful Lukomir, or rather in the area around Lukomir where the Trans-Ural Trail also passes through. So it actually runs right behind us, and every few minutes you see a twin-cylinder or single-cylinder bike passing by. So it really is a very impressive area, and I can honestly recommend to anyone who wants to ride off-road, come here, check it out for yourself. The terrain around Lukomir is also relatively easy to ride. Of course, you can take some turns where it gets a bit rougher, a bit rockier, but I have to say, this really is the perfect terrain to truly test a twin-cylinder, an adventure bike, so to speak. But today, in this video, I'm really focusing on the off-road performance. How does the 800 MTX perform off-road compared to its on-road performance? I've already uploaded a video about that, where we were traveling in Romania on the legendary Transfăgărășan and Transalpina. So there's already a video on that. Feel free to check it out if you want to know how I liked it on the road. Today we're going to take a look at how everything works when you're riding in an area like this. And there are also 2 or 3 little gimmicks or 2 or 3 little tips from me about what is actually installed on the CFMOTO 800 MTX, things that probably not everyone knows and why that is. But before we get to the onboard footage and I share my impressions from inside the helmet, let's take a look at the most important technical specs of the 800 MTX together. So it's powered by The 800 MTX is powered by a pure 2-cylinder engine, delivering 95 horsepower at 8,500 RPM. The maximum torque of 87 Newton meters is reached at 6,750 revolutions per minute. CFMOTO can really shine when it comes to the transmission as well. Here we have a 6-speed manual transmission with a blipper function installed. And of course, as is state of the art today, it comes with an anti-hopping clutch. In my opinion, the 800 MTX really shines when it comes to the suspension. Up front, we've got beefy 48mm stanchions installed. At the front, we have a suspension travel of 230mm. The upside-down fork is adjustable for rebound, compression, and spring preload. And at the rear, we've also installed a truly massive shock absorber, also with 230mm of travel, which is likewise adjustable for rebound, compression and preload. If we take a closer look at the brakes, we've got a complete braking system from Chuan installed. At the front, there's a double disc setup with 320mm and a 4-piston brake caliper. At the rear, we've installed a single disc with a diameter of 260mm. The tires are typical for enduro bikes. At the front, a 21-inch wheel with 90/90, and at the rear, we've fitted an 18-inch wheel with 150/70-18. As is typical for CFMOTO, the tire manufacturer in this case is CSD. In my opinion, what shouldn't be missing in today's modern times is a comprehensive electronics package. Here we've installed a 6-axis IMU, and we've included 3 riding modes. This means you get lean angle dependent traction control, lean angle dependent ABS, and we have a 7-inch TFT display that's positioned upright. It's very easy to read. Parameters that are really important for a touring enduro or an adventure bike are, first of all, the fuel tank capacity. Here we have 22.5 liters of fuel inside thanks to this underslung tank. That gives us a range of over 400 kilometers. The fully fueled weight with those 22.5 liters of fuel is 220 kilos. This doesn't include the pannier system or the skid plate, which are already installed here as original CFMOTO accessories. And the seat height is 870mm. So I'm 178 centimeters tall, have an inseam of 83 to 84 centimeters, and I'll show you what that looks like. I swing myself onto the bike, set it upright, and you can see that my foot is still bent. So I'd say it could be 1 or 2 centimeters higher and I would still manage well with my height. So the slanted section in the middle is neither particularly narrow nor wide. So that's pretty typical for the mid-range class. In the mid-range class, you could more or less say there are certainly vehicles that are narrower, but also some that are definitely wider. But now I'll put on my helmet and share my first riding impressions from the helmet perspective. So here I am, seated on the 800 MTX. Let's take a quick look at the controls, some details, and a few little things, and then we'll move on to the onboard footage. If we look over to the left side, there's a 4-way joystick installed. We have a dedicated button here for the riding modes. We have standard, rain, and off-road. Of course, you can deactivate the ABS on the rear wheel and also completely turn off the traction control. However, the traction control on the MTX, the anti-ride mode is combined, which means you can either turn the traction control on or off within the riding mode, but you can't adjust it in increments. Up here we also have a temperature gauge, which I don't think we'll really need off-road. But what we do need is an adjustable clutch, or rather, the clutch lever here is adjustable, as is the brake lever. On the right side, there's the hazard lights and the start button. If we look to the front, there's a 7-inch TFT display, already a bit dusty because I've already had to ride here a bit. It's really very easy to read, including the tire pressure monitoring system that's installed here. Right now we have 28 degrees in the front tire, 30 in the rear. The air pressure is displayed, as well as the range. So you can really customize all of this a bit, tachometer, and of course the speed. And what I really like is that you can adjust the tilt of the display. So let's set it to the steepest position with Zinsta. That means this is the steepest angle. When I look at it now, it starts to reflect a bit. I'd say if you're taller, that definitely makes sense. But for me, it fits perfectly. And I think it's cool when I set the display all the way down. This way, everyone can adjust the display tilt. It's adjustable in 5 steps, so you can really set the display angle to your own height, and I think that's really neat. What I also find really cool is the adjustable windscreen, which uses the simplest mechanism you can find on the market, but it works extremely well. Also on the 450 MT, it really works very, very well. You can set it down like for off-road riding, so a bit of air comes in when you're not going that fast. That really works very well. We also have a USB socket up front, which is splash-proof. Yeah, overall that works well. So let's start it up and see if with Euro 5 Plus, the 800 MTX still has some sound. Yeah, I'd say for Euro 5 Plus, it doesn't sound bad at all. When it's really warm, when you've really ridden it hot, then it really starts to burble and crackle, and I really like that. Right, let's head off, really, just with one finger. I find the clutch is really very smooth. You can easily operate it with 2 fingers. Of course, we have a quick shifter installed here, but for taking off, especially if you're riding off-road, it's definitely important to have a clutch that's relatively easy to operate. Let's get into the standing position and take a look at how the suspension responds. Up front, we've really got massive 48mm fork tubes installed here. The rear shock is also fully adjustable. So in terms of dimensions, this is really, really excellent. So as we take off now, you can really feel that we've got some real quality in here. The basic setup for off-road riding, in my opinion, the front fork can be a bit too stiff. If you're really going to be riding off-road all day, I definitely recommend dialing out 1 or 2 clicks. Same goes for the rear shock. I really like it, especially the way it responds. Right now we've got the bike fully fueled with 2 aluminum cases and a rack on the back. We've got about 2.35 to 2.40 kilos on board, so we're not going to go all out now. My main goal is really to give you my first impression. But what I really like is that when things get a bit boring, like on longer curves, the suspension really shines. It has this nice smoothness to it. It really absorbs bumps very well. I really like that. Otherwise, in terms of handling, the tank is pulled down low, so the center of gravity is very low. It works really well, it's fun. It was also fun with the former sister models from the same group. I've already been out in the Alps and in Graz with the Norden and the 98. That's really something that's a huge advantage in this middleweight class with this low slung tank. Otherwise, when standing, if we just stay on this topic for a moment, my knees are positioned right here at the side of the seat. And that works really well for controlling the bike. This way you can really grip the bike nicely, you have good stability, your knees aren't pressed up against the tank where you'd end up half slipping off the bike, but instead you're comfortably padded against the seat. Otherwise, the handlebar position also suits me really well for my height at 1.80 meters. I'm leaning a bit forward, maybe, well, I'm not sure about raising the handlebars. Maybe I could try raising them by a centimeter so I could stand a bit more upright, a bit more like a touring rider, because I'm not a racer, I'm more of an enduro wanderer. And I think I'd like it even better if my upper body was a little further back. But otherwise, it's really a lot of fun. The traction control also works very smoothly. Maybe it kicks in a little earlier than it actually needs to. But I'd say in off-road mode, it intervenes really late. So that fits again. If you give it a bit of gas, you can tell with the CST tire that's installed that it's a typical 70-30 tire. So 70% on road, 30% off-road. It performs well as long as it's dry. Even on gravel like this, you can ride anywhere. I just prefer it when I know I'm riding more off-road than on the street. I just like having more grip. It's especially important to me on the front wheel, and that's where the CST, or rather the clone of the Pirelli Rally STR, which doesn't offer the ultimate tracking stability, but on gravel like this, when it's dry, you can really let it fly. All right, let's get through the mud early. Yes. So that was the first impression. We're still heading to Lukomir. We'll catch the wave there too. Yes. And there we've got asphalt and break our way up, and then it's gravel again. We're also still heading to Lukomir. Now we're going to take some beautiful shots, so there's really something to see. So you can also get an impression of the area. I can only recommend it to you. Come here, go off-roading. It's really awesome. Yeah. Arriving at the final conclusion, let's first take a look at the two gimmicks installed on the MTX that I'd like to show you. And then we'll talk about the impressions I've gathered over the last 10 days in Romania and Bosnia with the MTX. So let's get to the first point, or rather the first secret, though it's not really a secret. But I'll say this, probably very few people know what that screw down there is for. To be honest, I didn't know either and had to look it up. This screw is there so you can let air out of the shock absorber. Why would you want to do that? When you're riding with the suspension, or generally with the suspension over rocks, gravel, jumps and so on, then this shock absorber basically pumps some air into the stanchion up here. With this screw, which is on both the right and left sides, you can let the air out. Okay, how does that work? You just take a screwdriver or something similar and then you unscrew it here. You need to make sure the fork at the front is completely relaxed. Then we screw it back on and the response of the shock absorber becomes much smoother again. That means if I notice that the shock at the front is getting too stiff, it could very well be, especially if you've really put it through its paces, that there's a bit too much air in here. You can just unscrew it, let some air out, screw it back on, and then it's good. All right, well, okay, then let's move on to point number 2. How do you open it up now? Or rather, how do you adjust your suspension? First, you need a screwdriver, which is probably becoming less common. You also have to find a place to store it somewhere in the vehicle. CFMOTO thought of that. So we pull out the key and I'll set it here so we can focus on it. And at the front, it's basically, well, I can tell you, even if it's hard to see on camera, it's like a screwdriver. That means you pull out the key, go up there to the suspension, and then you can adjust your suspension in clicks. So you don't need to bring a screwdriver with you. And it's really these little details that I absolutely love. Also the adjustable display, so you can change the tilt. That's really something I like because someone actually put some thought into it. Someone said, hey, that wouldn't be a bad idea. One person is 1.90 meters tall, another is 1.70 meters tall. So being able to adjust the display makes sense, or also being able to adjust your suspension with a key. So I really have to say, hats off to CFMOTO. These are the kinds of things, even with the 450 MT, there are 2 or 3 of these little gimmicks in quotation marks. I really like that a lot. But now let's take a look at the conclusion, or rather, my impressions from the last 10 days with the 800 MTX. All right, so let's really sum up the impressions I've been able to gather over the past 10 days in Romania and Bosnia and take a closer look at the individual components. What did I like? Where do I maybe still see a bit of potential for improvement? If we start right away with the engine, with the drive, then it's the case that the CF engine of the 800 MTX is actually a bit more refined than its former corporate siblings. It doesn't sound too rattly, it doesn't sound too tinny, especially when it's cold. It still has a certain mechanical sound when it's cold, but definitely not as much as the comparable engines found in the orange vehicles. I think the intake, or rather the balance shafts that have been worked on, as well as the mapping, all of that really fits this concept very well. I find the throttle response of the engine really good. The riding modes are different, yes, but not in a way that you would say you notice a huge difference. What was a bit strange for me was that the off-road mode is actually a bit smoother than the standard mode. That means when you accelerate, in my opinion, it takes a bit longer for the throttle to respond. If I compare it now, or rather, the next video coming up is actually a comparison video with the Aprilia Touareg. So if you want to see that, it's best to subscribe right now. There, it's exactly the other way around. So we're basically riding in parallel right now. And I would say over there, it's exactly the case that the off-road mode is very, very aggressive. And with the 800 MTX, I have the feeling that the throttle opens a bit more slowly. And I have to say that's actually really pleasant to ride. So you get a nice smoothness, especially off-road. You're not immediately overwhelmed by the bike suddenly surging forward. The tuning is really well done there too. As for the engine itself, the 95 horsepower, I have to admit it's not exactly a powerhouse. It's not something that brings tears of joy to my eyes. It revs out nicely, and off-road it needs about 3,000 RPM. Then it runs nice and smooth on the road at around 4,000 to 4,500 RPM. That's when the engine really sings. If you rev it out properly, you can feel something happening and it fits well. Goodbye. Definitely not underpowered. So I think the 95 horsepower really suits the concept of this adventure bike very well. But it's not something where you have to be afraid that the power will overwhelm you if we keep looking further. One of the prime examples, or for those who have already seen the on-road video, is the suspension. And it's also good off-road, but not as prominent as it was on-road. On-road, I have to say, the suspension is really outstanding. So the smoothness it has inside, especially when it gets bumpy and tosses you around, I really like that a lot. Off-road, it's the same as I mentioned in the onboard footage. When it gets bumpy, when you drive over those long waves, it's really, honestly, just so cool. You stand there and make these really nice sweeping turns over it. You feel how the vehicle sinks beneath you. Then you come back out. You can ease off the throttle a bit if you want. The front wheel sets in a little, back and forth. It's just extremely well done. But what I did notice is that the first bump, or rather, when it gets rocky, when there are really sharp, jagged stones sticking out, that on the first bump, in my opinion, it's set a few clicks too hard. So let's say, if you're really riding off-road all day, then it's actually very practical in that case. You just take out the key, make 3 clicks to open it up a bit, make it a little softer. I would leave the rear shock as it is, even if you're riding with luggage and everything. It's really tuned very smoothly. The front fork, set it a bit looser if possible. And that's really such a cool gimmick. Just take out the key, make a few clicks, put it back in, and keep riding. Then you spend the whole day out there in beautiful Lucomir, or the area around Lucomir. And when you get back on the road, or the next day you want to ride on the street again, you just take out the key, 3 clicks to tighten it back up, and you're good to go. These are the little things where I really notice the attention to detail. That's something I really like, when there are these small hidden gimmicks somewhere on the vehicle. Now let's talk about the brakes. On road, I have to say I wasn't 100% satisfied, but that's a typical CFMOTO issue. I don't want to generalize since I haven't ridden all the models, but if I take the 450 MT as an example, in my opinion, the front brake is also the weak point of that vehicle. With the 800 MTX, the front brake isn't really a weak point, but in my opinion, it could have a bit more bite, especially on the road. Here you have a decent 320mm disc, dual discs at the front, and a 4-piston brake caliper from Changchuan, which is a subsidiary of Brembo. That means the hardware is up to the task, and the master cylinder up top isn't, how should I put it, a minimalist version either, so there's definitely something substantial there. I think CFMOTO simply chooses brake pads that are really very smooth, how should I say, maybe a bit too gentle for European standards, let's put it that way. So if I now, in a lineup of all mid-range touring enduros, when it comes to braking bite, it's definitely in the lower third. And I'd say maybe with different pads, it would be better suited for on-road use. But off-road, the brakes are set up so you can modulate them very precisely. The way we have it now, there's really a lot of gravel, and then you've got rocks mixed in as well. And then you almost get something like an asphalt carpet covered with tiny pebbles, which is really slippery, very slick. And if you have a really aggressive front brake there, you'll end up triggering the ABS every time. But it doesn't do that because that initial bite is actually a real advantage here. It makes it really easy to modulate, definitely, and it doesn't grab too suddenly. So I'd say, if you mainly ride on the street, swap out the brake pads. If you mostly ride off-road, it really works well as is. So I also like that here. Basically, if the on-road brake is effective in the lower third, then off-road, the brake works well in the upper third. If we move on to the other features, cruise control, display, readability, windscreen adjustment, and so on. We're standing here in front of a vehicle that costs 10,999 euros in Austria and 9,490 euros in Germany. Be happy, German colleagues, that you don't have to pay the Nova tax, because with 1,500 euros, you can do a lot with the 800 MTX. If we move on to the windscreen, with this single wheel adjustment, you can reach forward and adjust it while riding. At the front, there's a solid crossbar where you can mount your Garmin or your navigation device. These are also the kinds of things where I say others could really take a page from this. It's not rocket science up front. There's just a gear inside with a lever that you turn and then it moves up and down. So I really like that. The seat, the saddle, very comfortable. Not too wide, not too narrow. The step arch in the middle isn't all that narrow. It could actually be a bit narrower for off-road use. For the road, though, it fits really, really well. You can sit on the saddle all day, it's well padded. Also, in terms of workmanship, with the blue stitching and this sapphire blue color, it looks really cool. It all fits together very nicely. When standing, my knees are exactly in this area, so I grip the bike here. It's very softly padded, and you can really control the whole thing very well beneath you. For my height, it fits really well. As I said, maybe try a handlebar riser with 1 centimeter for an onboard show, so that when standing I can ride a bit more comfortably for touring. That's just how I prefer it a bit. But those are just little tweaks. Handling, how does it actually move? You just notice it, and physics is physics. I've used this example before with the Boxer engine. Now imagine you take a crate of beer, hang it around yourself, and then try to balance on a beam. And then someone gives you a nudge from the side. You'll tip over pretty quickly. But now if you take that crate of beer, split it in two and hold it out to the sides. And then you try to walk across the beam again and someone nudges you from the side. If the nudge is too strong, you'll still fall off, but you'll stay balanced much longer. And you really have to say this isn't a Boxer engine, and you have to give KTM credit for this. They came up with a really, really good concept years ago, pulling this tank down really low. If you look here, this bulge down here, so to speak, where most of the fuel is actually stored, that's the height we're talking about. That means here we have about 15 centimeters from the oil pan upwards, where the central mass is really concentrated on the 800 MTX. And you notice that in every situation. You notice it when lifting the bike, you notice it when riding on the road, and you notice it most of all off-road. You can really control the whole machine beneath you, partly with your knees, partly with your upper body. So that's really something where I have to say this advantage. I'm glad that CFMOTO adopted this concept in the 800 MTX because, back in '98 I was riding around Graz, and with the 901 Expedition I was in the Alps, so feel free to check those out as well. But this is something that really makes a huge difference in handling. Visually, it's always a matter of taste. I have to say, by now I actually like it. At first I was a bit torn about it, but now it fits. If we take a closer look at the bike, we already have original accessories from CFMOTO installed here. Up here we have the crash bars, and there's a massive heavy-duty skid plate, so you can lay the bike down however you want. We have the pannier system here. The whole thing will probably be available as a set offer, meaning the heavy-duty skid plate, upper crash bars, pannier system with rack, and a top case. I don't like top cases, so that's not on there. That will cost around 11 to 1,200 euros. And I think that really fits well with the MTX or the basic setup. So, who is the MTX really the right vehicle for? Is it an adventure bike? Yes, it is. Is it now the ultimate off-road weapon? Is it the vehicle I absolutely want to ride off-road all day long? No, it isn't. It's still a two-cylinder touring bike, but fully fueled it weighs 220 kilos. That's not a record. If we break off the mirror, if you compare it to something like 15 or 16 kilos, then we're somewhere around 212 or 213 kilos here. That means it's about 13 or 14 kilos above the benchmark, which for the Tenere is 199 kilos. But that's just my personal opinion. Can it ride off-road all day long? Can you really have fun with it in the undergrowth? Yes, the motorcycle can do it, but I wouldn't do it. I really see the 800 MTX as a typical 70-30 bike. 70% on-road, 30% off-road, just like we've actually ridden it over the last 10 days in Romania and Bosnia. In conclusion, it can only be said that CFMOTO has really delivered a powerhouse in the mid-range segment with the 800 MTX, priced at 11,000 euros in Austria and 9,500 euros in Germany. Other manufacturers probably won't be too happy that it's finally going to be available in Austria and Germany. Combined with the accessories or accessory parts that will be available from CFMOTO, which are already available on the market, it really is an option. I can only advise you, go to your dealer, sit on it, and take a test ride. If you have the chance, go to Bosnia. Check out the amazing country, explore the awesome destinations, and also the lost places. It's a really cool story. I hope you really enjoyed the video. If so, give me a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe to my channel. The next video will be a comparison video. 800 MTX versus Aprilia Touareg Rally 660. I wish you a wonderful day. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.